Text by S.E. Hinton. Day 4. When I used to ride in junior rodeos before money was such a problem, I had the same thing happen to me. You think the crowd is so loud you can't hear yourself think. Then you climb in the chute, and everything disappears except you and what you're up against. I wouldn't have cared if there were 5 guys down there or 500 or nobody. I was going across that creek. I started down the hill, changing gears fast. I didn't even hear the roar of the engine. I kept my eyes on where I wanted to land. A motorcycle needs speed to jump, where it's mostly impulsion with a horse. A horse can tell where you're looking and head that way, and care if he makes the jump. A horse is a partner, but on a cycle, you are all by yourself. Still, I leaned and steadied that hunk of machinery like I would a horse coming to a scary jump. When I left the bank and the air whistled around me and the rocky creek bed floated out behind me, I thought, "Good boy," and I wasn't talking to myself. I came down where I'd planned to, but harder than I thought I would. The cycle bounced hard and we parted company, the cycle going in one direction and me in another. I've had a lot of practice at being thrown from horses, so I know how to relax and roll, and I still got the wind knocked out of me. That sure is a sickening feeling, waiting for air and not really sure you'll get it again. Somebody came scrambling up the creek bank. I got a mild shock when I looked in that direction. I hadn't cleared the creek by as much as I thought. In fact, I'd barely made it. "Tex?" Johnny crawled over the edge and sat down on his heels beside me. "You okay?" I nodded, still needing all my air for breathing. Then I tried sitting up. Everything spun around, then settled into place. I waved at everybody watching from the other side. They all cheered and waved back. Well, I did it. I felt like I'd won a war, single-handed. Me and this little bitty thing. Johnny was getting some color back in his face. He'd been white as a sheet a few minutes before. "I thought you didn't have any competitive spirit," he said finally. "I just wanted to see if I could do it," I said. "It was really great. You looked like a stunt rider or something, I guess." He looked away. "I shouldn't have let Roger psych me out like that, but he thinks that Honda is so cool." "Shoot," I said. "I don't see him jumping over here." Sure enough, the others were all driving off in different directions. "Johnny, there are people who go places and people who stay, and I think we stayers ought to stick together." He grinned at me. Then he said, "Your jacket's ripped." I took it off to look at it. It was an old sheepherder jacket of Mason's, but the only coat I had. Ripped was an understatement. It looked like somebody had rubbed a giant piece of sandpaper across the back. Then I looked at the cycle. It lay like a turtle on its back, the wheels still spinning. "I hope the cycle's okay." I started to get up, then caught my breath. My back was really sore. Johnny got up and gave me a hand up. I was tottering around like an old man, holding my hand on my lower back. "Are you okay?" "That's the question." "I can get a new cycle," Johnny said. "I'm okay." We got the cycle upright and Johnny tried to get it started, but it didn't. It'd just sputter and then die. We took turns pushing it home. Johnny limped a lot. My back ached terrible. We both felt fine. Chapter 5. When I got home that evening, Mason was standing against the kitchen doorway trying to mark off how tall he was. That doorway was full of marks like that. He turned around and measured the distance between the last 2 marks, scowling. "Ain't you growing fast enough to suit you?" I asked. I tried to take my jacket off without him seeing it. I didn't need a lecture about how I wasn't going to get a new one. Luckily, he was too busy writing on the wall to notice me. "Shoot," I said. "You're over 6 feet tall now. You don't want to turn into a freak." "I'd turn into the bearded lady if it'd get me into college," he muttered. He turned to me. "You think I've stopped growing?" I looked at him for a minute. You can tell how tall a horse is going to be by the length of his legs when he's young. I figured that'd work for humans, too. "Nah, you got a few inches to go." Mason sighed with relief. "Okay, I told you something. Now you tell me something. How do you think I look?" Mason choked on a laugh, then really looked at me for the first time that afternoon. "Well, you look pretty messed up right now. What happened?" "I jumped the creek on Johnny's cycle and didn't land right. I mean, do you think I'm good looking?" "The creek? You jumped the creek? The same one Joe Taylor smashed himself up on?" "Yeah, but I made it okay." "You harebrained idiot. You're not going to make it to 16 if you keep doing dumb." Okay, but Mace, just imagine, man, how it's going to freak everybody out at school that I jumped the creek and made it. They're going to go nuts." I was thinking about what Jamie would say. She already thought I was cute. Dumb word, but girls used it. "I am the one who is going to go nuts." Gall darn it, Texas. You could have ended up in a hospital for the rest of your life. He broke off suddenly, like he was too mad to even talk. He stalked off into the kitchen. In a little bit, I followed him. Hey, look, I won't do it again, okay? I said. No, but you'll do something else just as stupid. Sometimes I don't even know why I try. A flinch ran across his face. I slunk off into the bathroom to wash up. I really didn't mean to get Mason upset like that. Pop wouldn't be upset when he heard. He'd probably think it was really cool. I wish I could ask Mason if he thought I was good looking. It's hard to tell about your own face, since you see it all the time. I do have really good hair. It's probably my best point. It's a light, bright gold brown, the same color as my eyes. Its sun bleach is even lighter in the summer. I stared at the mirror trying to see what somebody else would see if they didn't live in that face. A chipped tooth, that scar over my left eyebrow that Mason had given me. I have kind of a bony face like Mason, but where he looks like a proud hawk, I look more like a surprised antelope. I've taken too much razzing about my dimples not to know I have them, but I can't tell if they're a good thing to have or not. Nobody's going to mistake you for Robert Redford if that's what you're worried about. Mason's voice made me jump. He was sitting on the bed changing into his jogging tennis shoes. I felt myself get red. I ain't worried about it. You ought to get your hair cut. Mason had cut his short last summer, and now a lot of kids in his class started cutting their hair shorter too. If Mason wore a pickle behind his ear, there's people who do that too. I can tell he gets a kick out of that, even though he never says anything about it. Jamie likes my hair just like it is. Mason raised his eyebrows, but didn't say anything. He looked like he was pretty much over being mad at me. I'm going into the city Saturday, he said. You need anything? Hey, I want to go too, I said. Come on. Okay, but you'll have to get up early. I got a 9 o'clock appointment. Sure, I said, thinking about how I could talk him into letting me drive some. Mason wasn't too bad about letting me drive. Not bad at all, considering I didn't even have a beginner's permit. But right after jumping the creek wasn't the right time to bring it up. I'd let him drive in and pester him to let me drive back. He'd probably be ready to let me. City traffic always made him nervous. It didn't bother me none. Maybe we can go to a movie, I said, getting excited. I hadn't been to the city for months, except for going to the fair. Maybe, Mason said. At McDonald's. Sure, Mason said. Sure. Saturday morning I got up even earlier than Mason. It was pitch black outside. He was awake, but he didn't seem to be in any big hurry to get up, which was funny after the way he'd pushed me to bed the night before, carrying on about how he couldn't be late. I wasn't sleepy like I was on school days. I fixed some coffee and scrambled eggs and burned 3 pieces of toast before I finally gave up on it. I heard Mason splashing around in the tub, but I'd taken a bath the day before. I wasn't about to take another one. Hey, let's go to West Mall, I said as Mason came into the kitchen. West Mall was a neat shopping center, all enclosed like a giant cave. I loved walking up and down looking in all the stores. Mason hated it. He always said the place made him feel like a hick because we couldn't afford to buy one single thing there. That wasn't true. There was a big discount store at one end of the mall where we'd bought jeans and shirts and stuff lots of times. Mason could get the weirdest ideas in his head. Sure enough, he said, I don't want to. When I opened my mouth to argue, he went on, You can go all by yourself while I'm at the hospital. What you going to the hospital for? Visiting Charlie Collins? I figured Charlie might be recommending him to some college or something. Charlie knew a lot of people. I'm going in for some tests. For a second, I thought he meant tests like school tests. Then I realized he meant tests like a doctor gives you to see what's wrong. I set my coffee down so hard it splashed out and burned my hand. Mason got up and started washing the dishes. He hadn't eaten a bite of anything. I just sat and stared at him, my insides quivering. Finally, he looked over at me. Good gosh, what's the matter? Is it cancer or something? I asked shakily. We didn't watch much TV, but it seemed like every day at school all the girls would be talking about some show where somebody, some kid or football player or hippie person was dying of cancer. It was so sad, they'd say. I just cried. Anyway, I knew sometimes people went into hospitals and never came out. What if Mason was dying? Tex, he laughed. It's not cancer. At least I'm pretty sure it's not. I just thought I'd better check it out. I just looked at him. Maybe he was putting up a front. He never could stand anybody feeling sorry for him. Yeah, I said. How sure? Well, Charlie didn't think it was serious. He set up my appointments for me. And when I didn't look convinced, he said, I don't lie to you, remember? I licked the back of my hand where the coffee had made a big red blotch. Maybe it wasn't serious. He looked healthy enough. A little on the lean side, but I was too, and there wasn't anything wrong with me. If you ain't sick, why ain't you eating anything? It ain't bad cooking for me. I lost my page. I'm starting at the top of page 90. Mason shook his head. I'm not supposed to eat anything until the tests are done. Come on, get your teeth brushed. It's time to go. It looked like everybody in the county decided they had to be in the city by 9 o'clock. Pretty soon Mason was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Then he was either muttering to himself or hollering out the window. Being a jock, he knew some good things to holler. I don't know why the heck people don't obey the law, he snapped as a big silver Chevy roared past us. I didn't point out the fact that we were doing 10 miles over the speed limit ourselves. I just didn't have the heart to laugh at Mace like I usually did. Maybe he was really sick. After all, people didn't go to the hospital to get tested for measles. If Pop knew Mason was sick, he'd come home. He'd do anything for Mason. But if Mace had to stay in the hospital, how could I get hold of Pop to let him know? What was I going to do if something happened to Mason? I stared out at the oncoming cars. Mace, I said, struck by a thought, did you ever think that all those people in those cars have a whole separate story to them? That it's just as important to them as our stuff is to us, and we don't know anything about it? Maybe sometime we'll run across somebody, and 2 years ago they were driving past us on the highway, and we never knew it. Like sometimes we meet people and bump off of them and never see them again, and we never know why paths cross. Yeah, sure, I spend a lot of time worrying about that, Mason said sarcastically. I'm not worrying, I'm thinking. Well, don't pass out from shock. I'm thinking it's dang dumb to have a 2-lane highway in this day and age. He leaned out the window and yelled some more. The traffic was a little better when we got to the expressway. It's better on Saturdays. The hospital was almost clear downtown. Mason was in a real sweat by the time we got there. He pulled down a side street and parked. Why don't you go on to the shopping center and meet me back here in a couple of hours, he asked. Don't you want me to go with you? No, he said bluntly. How come? My voice was rising. You don't want me to know you got something serious, right? That's it, ain't it? Mace reached over and patted my shoulder. Calm down, it's just that I'll have to be doing a lot of waiting around, and it'd get on my nerves to have you fidgeting around with me. You don't sit still easy, you know. He got out, and I slid over to the driver's seat. Mace? Come on, kid, I'll be okay. Look, be careful, and don't drag race. Okay. And don't lose the car. Once we had lost the car at West Mall because the parking lots were so big. We thought for an hour it'd been stolen, when it was just parked on the other side of the mall. I'd have to make sure of which door I went in. Okay, I said. You want me to get you anything while I'm there? Oh, sure, Mace said. Here's my American Express card. Get anything that catches your fancy. Then he turned around and walked toward the hospital. I watched him for a minute, then started up the truck and drove off. I got to the mall without any trouble, except I sort of ran a stoplight, but I didn't get caught. Most of the stores weren't open yet, so I walked up and down looking in the windows. After an hour or so, it started filling up with people, but I still felt kind of lonesome. It was weird being lonesome in a place full of people. I never get lonesome out hunting or fishing by myself. I tried not to worry about Mason. I went into the bookstore to see if they had a copy of Smokey the Cowhorse in paperback, but they didn't. I spent a while looking at the books anyway. I like to read okay, but I just never seemed to have time for it. Then I went into a jeans shop. I can't believe people buy jeans already faded, when just a month out riding in them will do a plenty good job. If you can help me, I'll let you know, the voice said. Okay, I said absently. Then realized that wasn't how the sentence was supposed to go. I looked at the sales girl. Sorry, she smiled. I was just getting tired of saying the same thing all the time. Anyway, I wanted to see if you were paying attention. I was now. She was really cute, with gold hair and big light green eyes and the neatest gold freckles all over her face. She was maybe a year older than me. Would you like to try on some jeans? No. I'm just looking, I said. Somehow the thought of picking out jeans with a girl sales clerk was kind of embarrassing. Then I felt dumb. I must look really dumb. Maybe this was why Mason hated going into stores. They made you feel dumb. I turned around and nearly knocked over a rack of shirts. I set them up and hurried out. I heard her say to another salesgirl, I knew that kid wasn't going to buy anything. Yeah, but he was a foxy little devil, wasn't he? The other one said. I was so confused I couldn't see straight. and almost knocked down an older lady carrying a bunch of sacks. I hate getting embarrassed. The more you think about it, the worse it gets. I stopped at the snack bar to get a Coke to cool off. That sales girl was kind of cute, too. I couldn't figure out why girls were getting so cute lately. Last year, they hadn't been so great. I sat down on the edge of the indoor fountain and tried to calm down a little. I couldn't go charging around knocking things and people over. That would really look dumb. Every once in a while, somebody would come along and toss a penny in the fountain. The bottom was covered with pennies. That always made Mason so mad he couldn't see straight. Shoot. If it'd get me a wish, I'd try it myself. Anyway, it wasn't my pennies they were throwing. Try and tell Mason that. Then I felt mean, thinking about Mace like that and him at the hospital that very minute. I was tired of walking up and down, so I went outside. Across the stretch of parking lot was a big sporting goods store, a movie house, a record shop, and an ice cream parlor. If you didn't know better, you'd think stores multiplied like rabbits. I walked over to the sporting goods store. I meant to look at the guns, but got sidetracked by the fishing stuff. It had been a long time since Mason and me had gone fishing. Maybe if I had got a new lure, he'd want to go again. I like hunting better myself, but fishing was the only thing Mason really relaxed at. I looked the lures over, trying to remember what ones he already had, and trying to find one that didn't cost too much. I couldn't believe the way they had gone up in price. Finally, I decided on one, but it would take what was left of my money. But I hadn't planned on buying anything anyway. Mason could pay for lunch. Then I went to look at the shotguns. There was no way I could get one, but I liked looking at them. I found a 20 gauge I really liked. I put the fishing lure in my shirt pocket and picked up the gun to see how it balanced. It seemed a little stock heavy to me, but maybe that was just sour grapes since I couldn't get it. Good sights on it, though. I sighed and put it down. Duck season was coming up. Well, Christmas was coming up too. I walked around a little more, looking at tennis stuff and skiing stuff, and wondering if there were enough people to buy all the stuff in stores. I guess there are, though, or there wouldn't be so many stores. I looked at the water skis. I went water skiing once, and man, I loved it. Someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around and faced the salesman. "Kid," he said, "can you read that sign?" I looked where he was pointing. "Shoplifters will be prosecuted." "Sure, I can read it." "Do you know what it means?" "Yeah, you catch somebody stealing, you'll do your best to send them to jail." "Good, now come with me." I did, not even thinking about asking why. When you're in a strange place, you don't think about having control of anything. I followed him into a back office. "I got another one, Ed," he said to a man behind the desk. Ed looked up at me wearily. "What was it?" The salesman reached over and pulled the fishing lure out of my pocket. For a second, I didn't know what was going on. Then I broke out in a cold, sick sweat. They thought I was stealing it. "I was going to pay for it," I said, when I could get my breath. I went from shocked to mad to scared. So quick I couldn't tell which I was feeling. "I was going to pay for it," I repeated, trying to keep my voice level. I sounded guilty. I even felt guilty. I must look guilty, too, I thought frantically. All kinds of visions were going through my mind. What would Mason say? What would Pop think? Jamie, being put in jail. I couldn't go back to jail. "They all say that," Ed nodded. "Say what?" I wondered. Then I remembered saying, "I was going to pay for it." "I never stole anything in my life," I said. Borrowing that car hadn't really been stealing. Anyway, I was just 12 when that happened. "Now that one I never heard before," Ed said. I was so scared and sick, I was close to crying. They'd never believe me. Nobody'd ever believe me. Pop would disown me. Pop was funny and talkative and loved to laugh and tell stories, but he had never ever said a word about prison or what it was like. Just drilled it into us to respect the law. That probably impressed us more than if he had given us a day-by-day description of it. Anyway, I knew what it was like, sort of. I remembered sitting in that jail cell, listening to somebody beat on the bars down the hall, screaming, "I'm drunk and I'm proud of it," over and over again, and the smell was so bad, and the walls got closer and closer, and I knew if I had to stay in there, I'd go nuts like a caged animal and beat my head in against the wall. And I was trying to sit real still to keep from doing that when Pop came to get me. From the look on his face, I thought I'd go straight from jail to an orphanage. And when we got outside, he belted me, the only time he'd ever hit either of us. I just put it in my pocket for a minute while I looked at a gun, I said, as steady as possible. The way they were looking at me made me feel like I was the worst kind of trash. Mason, even if he believed me, he'd never live this down. He had such a pride thing about never getting into trouble when he had so many chances to. He had turned very sarcastic on Johnny once, when Johnny smuggled a carton of Eskimo pies out of the Safeway store, made him so miserable he couldn't even eat more than one or two. Was he out of the store? Ed asked the salesman, or about to leave the store? It was weird, being talked about like you weren't even human. He was inside, the salesman said reluctantly. Turn him loose, this time. He went back to his papers. The salesman opened his mouth to protest, then snapped at me. You heard him. Get out. Everything had happened so fast, I still didn't feel like I could move. I was going to pay for it. I made one more effort to clear myself. I got the money to pay for it. I almost took my billfold out to prove it. Kid, Ed said, people come in here, kids with bigger allowances than my salary, and it's just like mountain climbing to them. They take things because they're there. Sometimes we find merchandise in the trash bins. Once they get away with it, they're bored with it. He glanced up at me, and for a second I felt like he believed me. Still want the lure? I looked at it, laying there on his desk. A fishing lure was going to make me slightly sick for a long time to come. I shook my head. He escorted me out, but he didn't need to worry. I was never going into that store again. I stood outside for a few seconds, still a little dazed. It took me a few seconds to realize somebody was calling my name. Tex, are you deaf or stoned or what? I turned around. Jamie was standing outside the ice cream parlor with 3 or 4 other girls. Hey, I said. Hi. She was wearing jeans and a shirt I knew belonged to Johnny and that he'd told her not to touch. It was a little too big for her. I couldn't tell if she was wearing a bra or not. What are you doing here? She asked. The other girls were giggling and whispering together. Nothing. Just killing time while Mason's at the hospital. Just looking at her was making me a little dizzy. The jeans sales girl wasn't anything compared to Jamie. I wondered how I could ever have thought any other girl was cute. I must be in love, I thought. And my insides got shaky and my hands started sweating and there was a buzzing in my ears that made it hard to hear. Doing at the hospital. I realized Jamie had asked a question. Hospital. Mason. Oh yeah, Mace was at the hospital. Huh? Maybe he wouldn't want everybody to know he was sick or something. Mason was really a fanatic about keeping things private. He went to see your brother, Charlie, so Charlie could show him the hospital. Mason thinking about being a doctor. Then it occurred to me that she might talk to Charlie and find out different. Somehow, when I was around Jamie, I didn't exactly know what I was doing. Going to make money in nurses? Huh, Jamie said. Couldn't think of anything to say to that. Well, she said, that's what Charlie says about being a doctor. Cold kill him if he heard. Of course, Charlie's only kidding, partly. Jamie's eyes were bluer than a twilight sky, and her hair had a sheen like a summer horse, and I wanted to squeeze her till she crunched. I wanted to rescue her from something. Spent the night with Laura. She was pointing to one of the girls. I couldn't tell which one. They all looked alike. We're going to the movies, and Cole's going to pick me up later. I looked up at the marquee. I hear that's a good movie. I felt like everything I was saying was coming out really dumb, but I couldn't seem to stop it. I've seen it before. I like the guy who plays the smuggler. He's a doll. Anger flashed over me like a freak lightning storm. Oh yeah? I hear he's a real wimp. When the covey of girls giggled, I realized how that sounded. It sounded jealous. I might as well have yelled, I love you, over a loudspeaker. That was how it sounded. I felt the red spreading up my neck till my ears got hot. I expected Jamie to be glaring at me, but she just said, whatever you say. Then I noticed she was a little pink too. All I could think of was getting out of there before I said anything dumb again. I got to go, I said. I did too. It wasn't just any excuse. Mason would be waiting. Well, I'll see you around, she said. Yeah, I said, and hurried off. My heart was thumping in my ears so hard I thought I would be deaf, but I heard, clear as anything, one of those girls say, oh, Jamie, he's cute. And Jamie say, yeah, he's real sweet too. She liked me. I had a chance. I stepped out in front of a green Firebird and nearly got run over. It gave an obscene blast of its horn and an angry squeal of its tires, but I didn't care. I had a chance. Mason was waiting for me at the hospital. He didn't even offer to take the wheel. I was still so wrapped up in Jamie that I'd driven 3 or 4 blocks before I remembered he had his problems too. Did you find out anything? I asked finally. He sat slumped in the corner, glowering like a cornered wildcat. I half expected him to shoot off sparks. Yeah, I found out something. I got a gall darn ulcer. That's what I found out. I got a Gall darn ulcer. Anything else you want to know? That wrenched my mind off Jamie. An ulcer? Is that bad? I mean, serious? Well, it could get serious. It could get pretty gall darn serious. His voice was shaking. I kept quiet and drove as careful as I could, and by the time we got to McDonald's, he straightened up, took a couple of deep breaths, and unclenched his fists. I ordered 2 Big Macs, 2 orders of fries, and a chocolate shake. Mason had a strawberry shake. That was all. Have some French fries, I said, holding them out. He shook his head. I'm not supposed to eat stuff that'll bother me. Last time I had French fries, they bothered me. He was quiet a second. There goes the old chili. I stared at him. No more chili. He'd starve. Hey, man, I said. I'm sorry. You and me both. I got to get some pills, too. I'm not supposed to let things get to me. His voice broke. It was awful to see Mason upset. He always stayed cool. Now, just how the heck do I do that? I figured I wasn't one of those things that got to him. Me and... You can still play basketball? I asked anxiously. Yeah, he nodded. So far. It could be worse. Have a hamburger. You can have a hamburger, can't you? Yeah, but I'm not hungry. I had to drink some barium and it really killed my appetite. Mine was gone too, but I finished my second Big Mac and cleaned up the fries anyway. I don't get to McDonald's very often. It could be worse, he repeated a couple of times. By the time we were ready to go, he sort of seemed to believe it. I hope these darn pills work. You've been having pains? I said, surprised. I never noticed it. I didn't publish it in the paper, but yeah, I had them. Bad, too. I was puking blood after practice last week. I looked at his lean, hawk face. Then there was something about him hurting like that and being too proud to say anything that really made me sad. You want to go see Lem? He asked, like he was changing the subject. Sure, I said. I'll drive. Okay, he said, once we were driving down Peoria. What happened to you today? Nothing much. I looked around the stores. I decided that hearing I'd been accused of shoplifting wouldn't do his stomach any good, so I skipped that. I didn't need to tell him about knocking over a rack of shirts. He'd laugh, so I skipped that. I had some other stuff to talk to him about, so I skipped the part where I saw Jamie. Nothing, huh? Well, that's a record for you. I felt like I'd told the biggest lie. I'd gone through 10 times as many emotions in that one day than I usually did in a week at home. I said, Mace, when you're making out with a girl and everything, how can you tell if it's okay to go further? Mason looked at me. I didn't know you'd even got to the kissing stage yet. Well, I haven't, but just in case. You know that's all. If you make a mistake, she'll let you know. He paused. I hope you're not going out for the school stud. I was just wondering, that's all. Is it really neat going all the way? Kid, don't get started on that now. Once you get going with girls, you can't quit. Anyway, he added quietly, I can't tell you what it's like. I never done it. I almost drove into the wrong lane. Don't tell anybody, he warned in a voice that promised instant death. But you and Bobby, you said, heck, Bobby hasn't made it any further than I have, but for different reasons. Everybody talks. If you don't know enough not to believe everything you hear, especially in a locker room, I'm telling you now, I never could stand the thought of getting tied down, he went on. I never wanted anybody to have any kind of hold on me. Look what happened to Lem. Nobody is ever going to stop me from getting out of here. Well, I knew that, but boy, that was desperate. No, it was almost scary. It hasn't been easy, and don't think I haven't had plenty of chances. Sure, I said. Lord, I knew he had chances. Being the school hero gave a guy chances. When I get to college, and at least have that much, if I can get over the feeling I won't be trapped. His voice trailed off. We were quiet for a long time. I was so surprised about all this, I couldn't even think of what to say. A whole lot of girls like Mason. He wasn't what anybody would call real handsome, but there was something about him that girls really dug, and he'd been dating since his sophomore year, but probably he'd never been in love. I figured that'd make a big difference. If you're thinking about Jamie Collins, you might as well forget it, he said suddenly, and hateful. Like he was mad he told me so much. What makes you think it's Jamie? You said her name in your sleep the other night, and it was obvious you weren't having a nightmare. I went red, then mad. Well, why not, Jamie? It's 'cause the Collins got money and we don't, right? You think money means everything? Nope, kid, he said gently. It's because you're Tex and she's Jamie. Money has nothing to do with it. What the heck did he know? Where did he get off telling me this stuff? Him and his darn honesty. Why don't you think you got to be so dang? Why do you think you got to be so dang truthful? Why can't you just tell me a nice lie once in a while? Texas, all my life I wanted somebody who knew more than I did to tell me the truth. I really wanted that. I never got it. I had to learn it all the hard way. I'm just giving you a present I always wanted. Thanks a lot, I said.